Okay, I think we are live on Savvy Investor on the Facebook page. I'm just double checking to make sure we're all up and running here. So for those that are brand new to Savvy Investor, I just want to, number one, welcome you to the Savvy Investor group and to our community. If you haven't had a chance to kind of maybe peruse, connect with others, I highly encourage you to do that. Oh, look, Lockbeer's here to see us. Nick, great to see you guys. Lance, pleasure. Nice to have you guys here. Really appreciate that. So those that don't necessarily know who I am, my name is Mike Ponte. I am the founder of Savvy Investor and also president of a real estate investment company called Prosperity Real Estate Investments. And I've been doing this for quite some time, just investing in real estate. So I'm honored and I always enjoy kind of sharing some of my knowledge based on the last 20 years of experience. And so I always kind of get feedback from the people that I'm talking to about topics that they always want to learn about. And this one is kind of a topic that has intrigued a lot of people. Oh, Nicole's here. Thanks, guys. Colin, nice to see you guys. Awesome. Francis, great to see you. Lee, Jason, nice to see you, buddy. Thanks for joining us. As I'm saying hello to everybody as well. So thanks, everybody. As you guys are jumping on, just say hello. Always like to see who's here. So there's going to be a lot of information going to be shared today. And the other thing that I have seen a lot of is there's also a lot of confusion that's also out there because there's so much information about this particular topic. And I'm actually talking to a lot of the individuals that are getting started or brand spanking new, and they hear all this positive feedback about, you know what, I'm not sure if I want to go into multifamily. I'm not sure if I want to go into single family. There's pros and cons that go to both. I'm not sure if there's that type of confusion that's happening out there in the audience right now, but that's a common thread that I'm constantly hearing is there's so much confusion that's happening. So I thought this would be an opportunity to kind of talk a little about the pros and the cons of both, and maybe kind of identifying maybe what is the right strategy for yourself. Okay, so that's kind of tonight's discussion. For those of you that are new to Savvy Investor and first time coming on live, I try to make it as engaging as I possibly can. So I can see your guys' comments, ask a lot of questions. I'll do my best to answer questions as I kind of go along here. But the most important part is engage. I highly encourage engagement amongst your fellow peers, especially through this, because people are watching and learning from each other. And that's really what Savvy Investor is about. And for those of you that are brand spanking new to Savvy Investor, I highly encourage you guys that for those especially that are struggling to reach out, connect with other Savvy Investor members and as part of the community and ask those questions. We're all here to help support each other to make sure that we're all successful in this journey together. Okay, so there's a lot of amazing people that are out there doing some amazing things. So again, get out to your community, make sure you're talking and reaching out to people, and if you've got those questions or concerns, let's make sure we get those questions answered. So let's get started on the topic at hand. So I'm going to share a screen real quickly. Hey, Linda, great to see you. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you're doing well. Okay, I think everybody can kind of see this now. I hope it's my beautiful smiling face. Who's that handsome guy that's on the screen? So hopefully you guys are able to see this. Okay, good. So let's ask the real question. Okay, for those that are just joining us right now, which is better? Is it single family or is it multifamily, right? So is it single family to multifamily? This is the question. And it's always a very popular question for people that are just getting started as well. So maybe just in the comments, I'm actually quite intrigued to hear some of the response that I get from everybody. What do you guys think is better? Maybe just share a little bit about your opinion. Maybe in the comments, just write SF is better, being single family, or MF is better. And maybe just share a little bit about why, because I'm actually quite intrigued to hear some of the feedback coming back from everybody. You know, I did a couple posts earlier when I actually announced this presentation, and I was starting to kind of get some response. So again, I'm intrigued to hear what you guys think. And I know there's a lot of people that are doing many different things out there. So for those, I'd be very intrigued what you guys think is better. Is it single family or multifamily? Depending on your strategy, depending on your goals. Really good question, good answers, guys. Really great. So, and the real answer is, you know, this is a question that I get, and then there's lots of pros and cons to both. And the key aspect to this is when you're dealing with multifamily and single family, there's actually many multiple different strategies that you can utilize, specifically when it comes to single family. You can go through the BRRRR method, you can wholesale and short sell, or day trading, you can do all sorts of different things, lease to own, lots of different things. And when it comes to multifamily, it is actually a different strategy in its entirety. So it's going to be very, very different. And it's going to be kind of maybe a mind shift change for a lot of people. Okay, just so everybody's aware. So with that being said, for tonight's discussion, I'm going to try to keep it really simple and not to try to overly complicate this, is I'm going to reference both single family and multifamily as just a standard long-term buy and hold property. Okay, so we're not talking about flips, we're not talking about, renos or putting in suites or any of those things, just a simple buy and hold and doing kind of a fair comparison between both of them. And I hope that's fair with everybody because we'll be here all night. So if everybody's good with that, just give me a thumbs up. Just make sure everybody's all on the same page and we're all okay with that, okay? So based on what I'm going to be talking about on single family today, I'm going to be talking about either a single unit, okay? If I look at a house that's on the image today, I will also look at maybe a secondary suite, which is a basement. So technically it's multifamily, 2 units, but let's keep it simple on the residential side and say single family is either 1 or 2 units with an upstairs and a downstairs, okay? Now, when I talk about multifamily, I'm actually talking about the commercial sense of multifamily. So just so everybody understands the differences, commercial multifamily investing is anything exceeding 5 units or more. So that's under the commercial multifamily process. So that's what we're going to be spending time talking about it. Anything under 5 units is still kind of considered residential and can still fall under the residential realm. So I'm not going to spend too much time so when I differentiate the two, I'm talking single family, 1 or 2 units, and multifamily, anything exceeding kind of 5 units or more, just because they are 2 different strategies. And I want to highlight kind of the differences between both of them. So I hope that's fair. I hope that makes sense. And like I said, I know there's lots of different strategies, so don't beat me up on all of these different ways you can do it. And I agree with you, there's lots of different ways. The important part is that we're just kind of trying to have some clarity between both and understand the pros and cons on both aspects of this. Okay, so let's proceed accordingly here. So the first and foremost, I think the real questions you got to ask yourself is there's some serious things that you truly need to consider when you're looking at 2 of these different strategies. So the real question that you need to ask yourself is, what's your investment purpose? And I think a few guys had referenced that earlier, like depending on your goals, depending on your strategy, you're bang on the money, guys. So thank you for that. Is what is your purpose? What's the investment strategy? What is your investment goals? And we've talked about this a lot on Savvy because it's really important. You got to have clarity to what direction you really want to go to. Is what is the objective at the end of the day? What is all of this for? What are those objectives? And by having some of that clarity first and foremost, it's actually going to kind of help provide you with some guidance in the strategies that we're talking about today. The second piece that I'm going to be talking a little bit more about is actually understanding some of the limitations that you actually have, because that will also dictate some of the strategies that we're going to be talking about as well. So when I talk some about limitations, there may be several different things. You may only have a certain amount of capital that's available to go out and acquire property. And you're like, you know what? I want to have enough capital. I want to have enough cash flow in my properties that I can actually replace my income because I don't actually want to work, but I've only got $100,000 to do this. Well, it might be really, really challenging to kind of get into multifamily with that type of an amount. And you guys will see some of those numbers shortly. But you could utilize that to maybe do some fix and flips, to repurpose a lot of that equity and do this over and over and over again. You continue to build on there. At some point in time, you may want to move into multifamily at a later time. So that may all of a sudden determine what the strategy is going to be right off the bat because you have a limited amount of capital, right? So that's just one piece. The other part may be just limitation in regards to your ability to get financing. Maybe your debt service is a little bit high because you own too many properties, or you just have maybe a little bit of debt or whatever the situation is. That can also dictate a little bit of your strategy as well in regards to what can I do moving forward. Well, in multifamily, there's another way to kind of work through that, and we'll talk about that as well. One of people's goals may be, you know what, I want to own in the purpose of investment properties for strong, really good, strong cash flow that's going to help offset my retirement income. I don't know if that's anybody here. Raise your hand if it is, if people are looking for a good, strong cash flow as part of the retirement plan. I know for myself, that's definitely one. I'm not retiring anytime soon, but the reality is that is part of my plan down the horizon. And this is where multifamily can be a huge benefit because they provide really great, strong cash flow opportunities. And there's multiple streams that actually can be created as well. Okay, so that's really, really key. So make sure you understand that. What are some of those objectives that you're trying to understand? So what are those goals? What are those objectives? And more importantly, some of the limitations that you have. Identify it, have clarity to this so we can actually see what the next strategy or the right strategy is going to be, okay? So it's important to understand your investment objectives, understand your limitations. So let's go deep. Let's start to focus and get right into this and understand some of the differences between multifamily and single family, okay? The first one is they are different. They are absolutely different strategies in its entirety. So I can't enforce this one enough. First, people need to understand that when you're getting into multifamily, and this is going to be a real weird one for a lot of people, they have a lot more commonality to a coffee shop than they would be a single family property, okay? That's going to sound very, very strange. How is an apartment building more relatable to a coffee shop than a single family property? It doesn't make sense. It's too strange. But the reality is when you're dealing with multifamily, it is a business. And I know everybody's heard this terminology or hear people saying this quite often is, you got to treat your real estate like a business, and you do. But in apartment buildings or multifamily, it is a business. The way you analyze the property is very different. The valuations and increasing the value of the property is different. Even in how you manage the property can be quite different as well. So for those that are considering kind of getting into the multifamily world, it is like learning a whole new different strategy. It's like turning things kind of upside down. I've just literally finished the course with my students actually just on multifamily just recently. And honestly, I had people really just so challenged in regards to understanding how this works and why it's not relatable to the single family side. And so they may have it was a different way of kind of thinking about this and how you're doing the calculations. And so the reality for a lot of us that are here, they've all learned how to invest in single family, or they may not have that experience or knowledge yet, but they're learning this. But when you're dealing with multifamily, it is completely different. So I want you to look at it like exactly this. If you're investing in single family, this is the process that you need to follow, the steps you need to follow, and this is how increase in valuations and all those things tend to happen. If you're looking at multifamily, it's a whole new set of learning and knowledge that you need to have, because the real question that you got to ask yourself is, I may own 5, 6, 7, 8 single family properties. I may be doing very well in that, but do I truly have the experience and knowledge to run a business? So ask yourself that, can I run a coffee shop? Can I run a franchise? Can I truly understand all the aspects of running a business? And if the answer is no, this is where the differences are. And this is where you need to adapt and change to understand that element of the multifamily side. So they are very, very different strategies. And so I can't enforce this one enough, because I see a lot of things that are happening out there right now. So there's some extremely hot markets across this country, and I'm sure everybody's seeing this, but I see a lot of residential investors going out there buying multifamily in the same way that they've looked at managing or looking at single family. So I can't enforce this enough. Please take the time to learn this and just understand it a little bit more so you can absolutely grasp this if that's a direction that you really, really want to take, okay? I'm here to protect yourself and just open your eyes to it. It's not to scare people, because that's not the intent. I just want to help people kind of stay motivated and understand. Just think about multifamily and just understanding the system as I'm kind of starting all over again, like I learned in single family, but now in multifamily. I hope that makes sense. Give me a thumbs up if everybody's following me here, okay? So next, the big one that is going to probably impact a lot of people when they're considering the different strategies is purchase costs, okay? So it can be a deal breaker right off the bat, just so everybody's aware, because that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the purchase costs when it comes to single family and multifamily are very, very different, okay? So, when we understand some of the costs between the two, especially single family, it is definitely much more affordable. Okay, much more affordable. When you think about kind of like a down payment, you're looking at maybe 20% down. And again, I'm keeping it simple, guys. I'm not talking seller financing or any of those things, so let's keep it simple. But like down payment is roughly 20%. An appraisal cost, let's say $400 or $500. Inspection, maybe an extra $500. Legal fees, maybe another $1,000. Okay, so those are kind of your typical standard costs for a single family. So a lot of people get into this because you know what, they've got a good line of credit. They've used they pulled a HELOC setup, or they've got a HELOC setup, and I've got some capital now to reinvest. So it is a much more affordable process to go down this road. Now, when it comes to multifamily and that process, it is very different again. And so when we're looking at the down payment, if we're using CMHC insurance, I'm not going to get into too much detail because I'll be here all night talking about it, but CMHC insured mortgages are roughly around 20% down. So kind of standard to what you would have in a single family home. Fantastic, great. Now, if you're going more conventional financing, okay, just kind of your regular run-of-the-mill financing for not CMHC insured, and CMHC insured, you can get amortization of 35 years, even up to 40 years. Shocking, yes, you can. And really great aggressive interest rates. But when you're going conventional, where there's not as many CMHC fees, you could be looking at down payments of roughly 25 to 30%. That's very, very common. Amortizations, 25 years, maybe 30 years if you're lucky. Okay, so let's kind of put some things into perspective. Apartment buildings, let's just keep it simple. And I know the prices are varied all over the country, but let's just say a multifamily deal is $1 million. Okay, we're going to buy a 10-unit apartment building, 100 a door at $1 million. So right off the bat, you're needing to come up with roughly $200,000 to $300,000 just for the down payment alone. Okay, so just understand that that's just the down payment. We've talked a lot on Savvy about making sure you have adequate reserves to protect ourselves. This is just one of the costs that you need to have at the very beginning. So understand that. CMHC insured, 20% down. If you're looking conventional, 25 to 30%. When you're dealing with single family, it's standard, 20% down with some basic costs. Now, when it comes to the costs of the acquisition of a multifamily property, this may be a little bit of a shocker because the whole process of the acquisition is a little bit different, okay? So when you're looking at these types of costs, there are so many different types of reports that are needing to be done to get your financing approved. So I kind of joke around a little bit when I talk to my students or anybody about this. Is like, okay, guys, you got to put your big boy or big girl pants on because in multifamily, you're going to be needing a lot of this, right? And that's the truth. And if you personally don't have the money to do this, then part of your skill set that you need to learn is maybe raising capital, maybe joint venture partners or any of those things. So it's just understanding some of the costs that are associated with that, okay? So there's no point in looking into multifamily if you don't have the capital, okay? So to kind of go into the purchase costs, down payments, these are the first and second deposits, kind of standard, and sometimes it's going to be a little bit more, maybe $20,000 for your first deposit, which is just to secure the property. And then the second deposit would be maybe another $15,000, $20,000 roughly there as a second deposit after conditions are removed. So there's going to be an environmental study, which is going to take a look at the history of the property. Has there ever been any oil contamination? Was this property built on an old gas station where there could be some oil contaminations there? And if that's the case, what you're wanting to determine is this study, this environmental study, which is called a phase 1 environmental study. It usually costs about $2,500. You want to make sure it's clean, that there's no issues, because if it goes to a phase 2 because something was detected, then technically that cost could run you an extra $20,000 to $30,000, and that's just in its beginning. If they find anything, you may have to clean up the contamination and all that. So it can be very, very costly. An engineering report, so these are all reports that need to be provided, just so everybody's aware. An engineering report is no different than an inspection, except it just goes into a little bit more detail specifically on the apartment building. So there's a report that's needing to be conducted. Part of that report, they're also determining the longevity of the building in itself. Is this building going to stay up for 30 years or 40 years? So these are the types of reports that need to be pulled. The appraisal, that is a cost that you're going to have to come up with, very expensive. If you're going to get CMHC insured mortgage, this is a setup cost of $150 a door. And then in addition to that, if you're doing CMHC, you're going to have to also come up with 3.5% of the mortgage. That amount's actually just going to be tagged to your mortgage, just so you're aware, but that's part of the cost. Here's an interesting one. Now, when it comes to your mortgage broker right now, when it comes to single family, technically, who's paying for that mortgage? Put it in the comments. Who's actually paying for that mortgage today? Okay. Or who's paying that mortgage broker? Let me know who it is. Who's paying for that? You guys are probably going to answer it's the bank that's paying for it. In the apartment building world, technically we pay for it. And it can range from 1% to probably 1.5%. Okay. So if you're using a mortgage broker, this is part of the cost that you're going to have to understand. And this is part of it. This was the big shocker for me many years ago when I got into multifamily. It was actually the legal fees. And this is, I'm being really, really light on this, to be honest with you, but they can range roughly $8,000 plus. So these are costs that you need to have budget for, and these are the things that you need to have available. So again, it's not to scare people. It's all about just understanding the cost if this is the game that you guys want to partake in. So understanding the down payments, understanding the capital that you're going to be needing, the deposits, all of these costs. These are things that you need to have available as you go down this process. It's just part of it. And again, I joke around with it about needing to put your big boy pants or big girl pants on, but this is the reality of it. It's a very expensive game to play in, but it can be very, very lucrative if you see it in that type of fashion and you acquire right, okay? So the other kind of part that we look at is what are some of the other variances that we see when it comes to single family and multifamily? And tenant quality is also a big variance. And I did post this just as a little bit of a joke. I thought it was kind of funny. I'm like, you know what? I got to post this somewhere because it's quite humorous, even though it's not funny. You don't want that to happen to anybody's property. But at the end of the day, this can happen in a single family and a multifamily when you're dealing with tenants. But again, this is a different subject for a different day. I'm not going to go down that road. That may be a future presentation about tenants breaking bad on your property. Oh, I like that name. Maybe I'll use that. So the reality is that's a whole different aspect. But when it comes to tenant quality, when you're looking at single family properties, especially single family homes, based on the image that I shared with everybody earlier, you're more often than not going to be targeting families, okay? And families, believe it or not, are actually really good quality tenants. In a lot of cases, you get kids set up in a school and they have established themselves there. You know, they tend to stay there because they are set, they are established. And in most cases, they tend to take pretty good care of the property. So when and the other part is you don't tend to see them leave very often and turn over very often because they are already set and established. So from a single family perspective, you tend to get a little bit of a better quality and more longevity of a tenant profile than you would maybe in a multifamily segment, okay? And it's not to say that a lot of all your tenants are going to be doing this to your property as soon as you buy multifamily. I've got tenants that have been with me for years and years and years and years, and honestly been fantastic tenants. But there's many variances that come along with it. So multifamily can attract a different clientele base. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? It really isn't. It's not to kind of scare people off. It's just different. So let me kind of test people out. Let's just get everybody's brains working a little bit. So, you know, let me, in the comments, guys, why don't you just kind of share maybe a demographic. Let's say we have a bachelor suite that has become available in one of our apartment buildings. I want you to kind of think about who the demographic is of the ideal tenant for that particular bachelor suite. So maybe identify maybe the age, the sex, you know, is it a male or female? You know, maybe what's their profession? Are they single? Are they not? So kind of identify who the ideal tenant would be for a bachelor unit, just to kind of start thinking a little outside the box. And for those that don't know what a bachelor suite is, because I think the terminology might be a little bit different down in the States, and I know there's some fellow colleagues that are joining us, fellow savvy investors that are joining us from the States. So it's a single one big room with no bedroom, but it does have a bathroom and attached kitchen. So who would an ideal bachelor tenant be? So Tammy's referenced a single employed male. Wow, I think you're reading my notes. I'll challenge you a little bit more, Tammy. What would be kind of the age of that person? You know, start to identify age, sex, profession. Okay, in a lot of cases, it's usually male. It is a single guy. Yes, Michelle, thank you. 20s usually. Yep, usually singles. Female, correct, living in the city, professional, excellent. Well done, guys, good work. Thinking outside, that's perfect, very, very good, okay? So again, usually it's a male, Usually it's early to mid 20s. They are usually single. In a lot of cases, they're never home very often. Okay, so that's kind of your typical bachelor. So as you can see, a different tenant profile than what you would normally see in a single family home, which is more of a family base. Let's challenge you guys a little bit more. Let's maybe ask the same question, but now in a 1-bedroom suite. Who would be that ideal tenant, or who is that tenant that we would be attracting in a maybe a 1-bedroom suite? Okay, so again, age, sex, profession, are they single, are they not? Give me some kind of determination of who those types of people are that would be renting maybe a 1-bedroom unit. Okay, so with that being said, you guys are popping things up right now. That's awesome. Okay, so you got a 1-bedroom single, young couple. Great, Nick, thank you for that. Young couples, no kids, absolutely. These are all really good. 20-ish, thanks, Peggy. Fantastic. Okay, so you guys are getting it right on the money. But as you can kind of see, the more you start to think about the type of segment and the types of property that you are renting, or say, for example, you're looking at an apartment building and you're looking at lots of bachelors or 1-bedrooms or 2-bedroom, then you start to kind of determine who the tenant profile is going to be. Okay, so with that being said, tenants move into apartment buildings, and it's usually for the main reason is because it's much more affordable. And in so most cases, it's usually the lowest common denominator for housing because it is much more affordable. So again, when you're dealing with that, again, you're dealing with a different type of clientele as a tenant. It's not necessarily bad, not at all. And I'm not trying to determine that. I'm just telling you that the quality of tenant from a single family home, more often than not, is a better quality tenant than people that are in an apartment building. Okay, so it's just a little bit of a different perspective. The important thing to remember when you're looking at multifamily or single family, and I can't enforce this one enough, is take the time to screen your tenants to make sure they're the right fit before you actually bring them in. Can't enforce this one enough. It doesn't matter, I'm highlighting 2 different types of demographics. It's not to say that one's better than the other. They are just different. Just understand that aspect of it. Okay, so take the time to do your screening and understanding that. Okay, so next piece is, as we talk about tenant quality, the perfect segue is also vacancies. And so everybody's kind of seeing this sign, but with apartment buildings, you tend to have vacancies. That's just part of the game. Technically, you see these kind of bachelor units that are going to be there. And I'll ask you guys the question, ask yourself, would you guys kind of, pretty funny, Michelle, thank you. Crazy cat lady lives in a bedroom too. So that's pretty funny. So thank you for that. So, but the reality is when you look at these people that are moving into a bachelor unit, how long are they going to be there for? Do you think they might get a little bit claustrophobic? If that single male all of a sudden meets somebody, they're probably not, the girlfriend or the fiance is probably not going to want to move into a bachelor. They may want to move into a 1-bedroom. And say they move into a 1-bedroom and all of a sudden they get married and they have a kid. Now, guess what? They feel a little confined and they may start to step out a little bit more and move into something a little bit bigger. That's kind of common for apartment buildings. So life just happens. And so with that happening, vacancies tend to happen as well because life tends to change. And so with that being said, when you see signs like this in the image that you're seeing, this is very common in lots of apartment buildings, is you'll just see this little slide that's saying a 1-bachelor or 1-bedroom available or bachelor available, or a 2-bedroom available. So in a lot of cases, that tends to happen from time to time. It is very, very, very common. But the big difference when it comes to the vacancy size is you will have vacancies. Let's say we have 2 units that are vacant, okay? In a 15-unit apartment building, well, you're actually maybe dealing with a 13% vacancy there. And what that actually really means when you're dealing with a couple units vacant is maybe for that 1 month, you're maybe breaking even, okay? You may be breaking even, or there's just no cash flow. You may not be getting as much cash flow. But the best part about it is most of your expenses are kind of covered off. Even if you're dealing with 1 or 2 vacancies, it's not a real big concern. But when you're dealing with single family, when you do have that 1 vacancy that's there, technically you could be 100% or 50% vacant, which can be much more impactful to you. So in multifamily, you do have those economy of scale in regards to having multiple units where a couple vacancies aren't going to impact your impact you so drastically, where in single family, that one vacancy can impact your bottom line because it's taking money literally right out of your pocket. So that is a huge advantage when it comes to multifamily, because you do have the economies of scales with multiple units, and we'll talk about multiple streams of income shortly, that multifamily has as a huge benefit compared to single family. So just understand that you may have a better quality tenant profile when it comes to single family, but when you do eventually have that vacancy, it can impact you a little bit more literally out of your pocket versus a multifamily side, okay? So when we move on to the vacancy side and some of the other benefits that we're looking into multifamily, and this is a big one, is actually cash flow, okay? So I don't know if anybody likes this type of machine, and if anybody finds a machine that can actually do this, let me know, because I'm be more than happy to buy this from them. And when I look at this, this in my opinion is a lot of the properties that I want to own and continue to buy, because I like cash flow machines. Anybody else like cash flow machines? Raise your hand if you like cash flow machines, because I think for a lot of us, that's what we're all looking for, is that machine that's generating a lot of income. And so for me, that's a real important one, okay? So with that being said, single family, you usually have maybe one or two income streams that are coming, but usually the cash flow in a lot of the single family is maybe okay, or in some cases it may be non-existent depending on the market that you're involved with. And so it's really, really important to kind of just understand, what are some of the income streams that are actually being generated from the property in itself. But at the same time, when it comes to single family, there isn't a lot of cash flow. There may be enough, and again, some markets are generating more than others. I get it, and that's all and wonderful. Here's one of the benefits that comes with multifamily, okay? And with multifamily, there's actually quite a few different income streams that actually can be produced. And I'm talking much more so than just the multiple units that are being rented. You can actually do laundry income, storage. So say, for example, there's some storage that it's available to store your bikes or other different storages. They may have these little storage areas that you can actually rent to tenants. Parking, you can actually, those little lines that are in the parking lot, you can actually rent those parking lines. It's amazing. Vending, so say for example, you've got a pop machine. If the building's big enough, you can work in an arrangement for vending. Even internet service, where you've got a hub and you're actually charging your tenants to use the internet service. So there's all these other sources of income that can actually be produced when it comes to multifamily, which is one of the real big benefits when it comes to a multifamily property. And that's why a lot of people really, really like it. It is truly one of those ones that, it's a huge advantage when it comes to multifamily. It can be an extremely powerful cash flow play for those that are wanting to invest for cash flow, okay? So you'll spend more money on the acquisition, but is definitely a great way to generate cash flow if that's a focus that you're looking for. And again, it is absolutely depending on property, location, and even the suite mix. So we talked about bachelors. If you got a building that is 100% bachelors, here's a question back to all the individuals that are paying really close attention to this right now. How long would you be able to live in a bachelor for? Or how long do you think that person will live in a bachelor suite for? I'd be intrigued to hear kind of some of everybody's comments. What would be that longevity to that? How long would they be there for? Because those individuals, if they're moving out quite frequently, it is going to have an impact in your cash flow if they're turning over and over and over and over again, okay? So just understand that. So the next one that I want to talk about, and this is a really big one, especially right now, and I think everybody's kind of seeing that, whoever's out there really active in the marketplace, and I hope it's all of you, is actually the appreciation side. So for single family, in most cases, appreciation is where investors have made the most profit. They've had huge success based on market appreciation, okay? So if you look at markets like Toronto, you look at markets like Vancouver, and they're having like 15 to 20% appreciation, which is absolutely fantastic. And for those of you in those markets that are getting that, congratulations. It's absolutely amazing. But here's the thing. We absolutely have zero control if the markets go up or down, like zero. We don't control appreciation whatsoever. So we can be very, very successful in this strategy with appreciation and hoping that prices are going to continue to go up. But at the same time, we're also in the same breath very vulnerable if things go the opposite direction. So that's, there's a lot of pros that come with single family, and there's a lot of cons that can happen as well. Currently the markets literally across the country are seeing signs of appreciation literally everywhere, which is a huge plus for single family. And I've got a lot of single family. It's putting a wonderful smile on my face as well, and it's doing well. And it's quite interesting to see so much appreciation in so many multiple markets. For those of you that are jumping in and chiming in, thank you. I'd be interested to hear, what markets are you investing in? What type of appreciation are you guys are seeing? Because I'm sure your fellow colleagues would love to hear this as well, because it's quite interesting to see what's going on, okay? But I want everybody to know that multifamily is actually quite different. It's not running like your conventional single family appreciated markets. So in multifamily, you can actually do something called forced appreciation. And that's a really interesting thing. And so, like I said, apartment buildings are run like a business. And this is absolutely true when we start to talk about increasing of valuation, okay? Increasing the value or the forced appreciation in the property in itself. So the real key and the real trick to multifamily, and this is where we need to change the mindset a little bit, is it's all about trying to increase something called your net operating income, okay? So for those that don't know what that is, it is your annual income. So this is your total rent, okay? This is all of those other incomes that I referenced: laundry income, vending income, your annual, all your income that you're producing from that property minus your expenses, okay, is referencing your net operating income. And when I reference expenses, that's not including your mortgage. So annual income minus expenses, that means property taxes, insurance, property management fees, utility costs, every expense with the exception of the mortgage. You're not including that. So annual income minus expenses equals your net operating income, okay? Now, for every dollar that you're able to increase your net operating income in multifamily, you're actually increasing the value of your apartment building by roughly $15. So just think about that. So for every dollar that you are increasing net operating income, you're increasing the value of your building by roughly 15 bucks. And this might be like, wow, that's kind of really bizarre and really weird. But there's something that is being referenced called the cap rate. And this is how your valuations are actually kind of compared and there's references to. So again, this is another very different way of looking at this. If we're looking at a single family home, right now, to do a comparison in regards to what the price is, you'll be looking at comparables beside each other, and they may look at 2 or 3 properties literally beside each other, and they're going to be like, okay, the average price is this, that's what it's going to look like. I may have 2 apartment buildings that look exactly the same size, everything's the same, side by side, and one may be worth $100,000 or $200,000 more than the other because one is performing much better than the other. And so that's something called the net operating income and cap rate. And so what I wanted to highlight is how the calculation kind of works. And so for those that are not familiar with cap rates, this is kind of a real simple calculation to do this. It's net operating income. So whatever the net operating income is, divided by the current market or the current price of the property itself that they're trying to sell it, it's calculating the cap rate. And so in multifamily, the cap rate or the average cap rate in the market is what's determining your price. And that's kind of what you're looking at. That's how you do comparisons between different multiple properties, okay? So I know this may be, and again, I am broad brush stroking this because of time, because again, I could be here all night and I'll give you guys some more insight of where to get this information at the end of the presentation. So hang tight for that, okay? So with that being said, if you do this well, if you find the right building, you may be able to increase the NOI, increase the value of that particular property, even though the market may not be doing well. The market may be in some form of distress, but you could actually be increasing the value of your building without being too concerned with what's actually going on in the market. So it's quite interesting how you can do this, and yet another huge benefit when it comes to multifamily investing, okay? Now, here's the interesting thing about both aspects of things, okay? Because again, when you deal with multifamily, it's all about increasing that income. So whatever you can do to get rent increases or reduction of expenses that's increasing the value. So that's what I'm trying to do here. But in single family, I'm looking at markets that are constantly appreciating and are going to continue to do well. So here's the interesting thing, and what we're finding, and I thank everybody for their comments about, yeah, it's forced to, appreciation is going crazy. Adele, thank you for that. And it is, it's going nuts. But here's the interesting thing. So if interest rates are going down right now, which they are, interest rates are extremely low for home buyers, renters now become home buyers because it becomes much more affordable. So they no longer want to be renters anymore. They actually want to be home buyers. And so that is taking a certain amount of renters out of the market to become home buyers. So when that happens, it's increasing the value of single family homes. But what is it doing to our multifamily properties? It's reducing it because now we're all fighting for whatever is available left for renters in the multifamily world. So whenever we see interest rates kind of going down, it can have a reverse effect when it comes to multifamily. Now, the reverse is actually kind of true as well. When interest rates start to go up and it becomes less affordable to get into the real estate market to go buy, then guess what? We may have more renters in the market because they can't afford to buy properties. So again, when you're looking at this, understand there's two kind of different methods in regards to generating profits on both ends. And even the different markets can also impact the way the values of both buildings go. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And I'm going to talk more about this in a little bit in regards to getting more information on this, okay? Because I know, like I said, I'm broad brush stroking this because I have to, but there's lots more detail that I can provide you guys at a later time, okay? So the other aspect that we tend to see is financing. And again, this is a massive advantage when it comes to single family, okay? So when it comes to the single family side, you can get this process, you can get this kind of approved 7 to 10 days, if not sooner. So realistically, it's not a really complicated process to kind of get approved for a single family mortgage. It's relatively simple. You get an application form, you got to provide a little bit of a credit check, maybe an appraisal needs to be done, but for the most part, you're kind of off to the races. So it's kind of a relatively simple, easy process. They do ask for a lot of information, but it's not anywhere close to what we're going to be talking about. So again, 7 days, 10 days, you can kind of get this wrapped up. When you're looking at timelines for your kind of single family home, you can probably get this property locked up under contract and probably take possession in less than 30 days or even roughly 45 days. It's not a really big, long process to actually complete. So it's not for the most part, it's a relatively simple process. When it comes to multifamily, and this is the con when it comes to the multifamily side, bank financing is an absolute nightmare. It truly is, okay? The big aspect and the big difference is we talked about how multifamily is much more of a business. And so when you're looking at it from the business perspective, the banks want to see the performance and how well the business is performing. That's the most important part. That's how they're generating, that's how they're really assessing this type of deal, is what are some of those things? What is the performance of the business, and is it doing well, yes or no? And if the business is not performing well, then it's going to impact your financing. The second part, okay, and not the most important part, is actually credit checks. And so they will start to do credit checks, and they're going to be extensive. I mean, very, very extensive in the information they're going to be asking for. Okay, the other part they're going to be asking, in addition to the credit checks, which is pretty standard for single family, is actually some of your experience level, because that might impact their terms in regards to financing as well. So they want to know what type of experience you have in running this business. This business may be performing fantastic based on the seller doing a good job managing it. But what is your experience for that to continue to go in that same direction and hopefully increasing the value, which is mitigating a lot of the risk for the bank? So they're going to want to know that information as well. Okay, so that's some of the preliminary stuff. Now, what happens is they're going to be assessing your deal. They're going to look at it. They're going to assess you. And then more importantly, they're going to say, okay, you know what? Based on the information that I've got, I am going to give you something called a term sheet, or a preliminary term sheet, which gives you the rates and amortization. And it's just kind of, but in that term sheet, there's lots of conditions that come along with it as well. And so with that being said, these individuals, with those terms, they're going to be wanting to see all of those reports that I highlighted earlier, and they want to scrub them completely to make sure everything is accurate. And that initial preliminary term sheet can change at any time. They may say in the term sheet at the very beginning, say, you know what, I'm going to give you 2% interest rate, Chris, and I'm going to give you 40-year amortization, Chris. And with that being said, that's what my preliminary term sheet. And then once they've scrubbed through all the numbers and they've gone through this and reviewed, and they said, you know what, Chris, I said 2%, I said 40 years, I'm no longer comfortable with that. I think I'm more comfortable at 5% and 10 years. And that does happen, and it can change at any point in time. So just understand, just the preliminary process at the very beginning, the preliminary term sheet is just phase one. There's a second phase to this where once they've done all the inspection, they can change what you're going to be getting for your financing at any point in time. So just understand this. And again, it's not to scare people. It's just to be having that clarity and understanding before you go down this road, okay? So when you're going through timelines with multifamily for conventional financing, and this may be a really shocker for a lot of people, just to get your financing approved, 30 to 45 days is not uncommon. Hold on to your seats. If you're looking at CMHC financing right now, which is an absolute nightmare, it's roughly 90 to and that's low, to up to 120 days easy. So just be aware of this, that there's some really long timelines that go along with multifamily, especially when it comes to financing. So really from acceptance to closing on a multifamily deal, on the average, 90 to 150 days is not uncommon. It's very, very standard. And so this may be a big eye opener for a lot of people. They're like, wow, I can't believe it takes that long. It takes that long because it requires a lot of information. And it's really funny because I see Adele's comment, thank you for that. But the reality is, it's a lot of information. You need a lot of information. And in her comment, she's referenced even blood type as well. You make me laugh. Thank you for that. But the reality is it's a lot of information that is required. Just be understanding that, be prepared as you are considering this, okay? So that's one of the cons when it comes to multifamily. So the next part is kind of more about scalability. I don't know anybody interested in scaling their business. I want to know, maybe just put in the comments, how many units or how many properties do people want to own? I'm intrigued. Tell me what you guys want to do. I want to see what those numbers are going to look like. Impress me. But I really would like to see it. So with that being said, when it comes to multifamily, it's like buying multiple properties all at once, okay? And so what happens is it's so much more obvious to make it, it's much easier to scale when, it's so much easier to scale your business on a single family property versus a multifamily property versus a single family property versus buying one property at a time. You don't have to go through 10 negotiations and 10 offers and 10 closings. You're just kind of doing it all at one lump sum. And yes, you're doing a lot of work at the beginning, but to really scale, it is much easier to do it on a multifamily side than obviously a residential side or a single family side. So for those of you that really are wanting to scale, I really want to highlight that, just be understanding that this is one of the better ways to do this. And the best part about it is there are going to be limitations when it comes to the single family side, because if you're constantly needing to put 10 applications, that's 10 credit checks, 10 negotiations. And obviously everybody's probably aware, and if you're not, the banks are going to put some limitations on how many you are able to own. And I think the number is between 4 to 5 properties now, and then they're just going to cut you off, and that's kind of standard. And so, but when it comes to the multifamily side, if you set it up properly, you can get it set up through a corporation to qualify for the mortgage. And it's actually not impacting your debt service ratio like a single family. You can actually do multiple properties in multifamily, as long as you have the means to do so. But it is a huge appeal for people that are maybe tapped out. Secondly, their debt service is too high and they're looking for a different way. But at the end of the day, they want to scale, they want to grow. It's all about generating more income and more cash flow for themselves. So highly encourage that if that's a focus for you and scaling, it's a much easier process than it would be on a single family side, because you're not needing to do the same thing over and over again. Okay. So next is more about the management side. And I had I had a slide. It was funny. I thought it was hilarious, to be honest with you. So anyway, I'm sharing this one here because in a lot of cases, there's a lot of pros and cons depending on how you look at it for both, to be really, really honest. And I think for a lot of people, for single family, that are people that are really wanting to self-manage. You know, a lot of people want to self-manage single-family homes because there's not as much turnover. There's not as much maintenance that needs to be done. So it's not a real big, complicated process, to be really honest with you. So for many investors that are just getting started, they want to self-manage. Partly is just to learn the business, but more often than not, it's just to really avoid that expense and keep that money in their pocket. So I get that. And that's very, very common. And so for people that want, you know, like, I'm going to self-manage this thing, I don't want to pay a property manager 10% or whatever the magic number is for that fee. I want to keep that money in my pocket. And in a lot of cases, without them self-managing, the property doesn't cash flow. And I've seen that a lot too as well. Okay. So here's the problem. If you really want to scale your business, at some point in time, you are going to need a property manager to oversee and look at that business if you really, really want to scale it. So understand that that is a piece that you'll need to, at some point in time, move on if that's the case. But for a lot of people, self-management's one of those pieces that you don't necessarily need to. Self-management is much more appealing because they can learn the business and at the same time save a lot of those expenses. Okay. So in a lot of cases, that's a main reason, that's a big one. So from a management perspective, single family, it can be a little bit easier to manage because you just don't have that same type of turnover, okay? Now management fees in single family can be higher, okay? So, you know, because you're dealing with maybe multiple units, be it multiple single family homes, lots of different addresses. And so when you're looking at fees, you know, they can vary. They can range between 8 to 12%, and it's quite standard. And there's lease up fees and other things that kind of come along with it. I'm going to keep it simple and just say the fee, roughly 8 to 12%. The more properties you have, you can maybe renegotiate or negotiate with your property manager. So that's kind of very, very common in single family. So the cost for management is usually a little bit higher. Now, when you're dealing with multifamily, again, it's a little bit more labor intensive in multifamily than you would see in a single family, because now you've got multiple tenants in one building. So again, you know, you may be dealing with different situations, different tenant issues, whatever the case may be. And there's probably a little bit more maintenance that's going to come with a multifamily property. Again, very, very common. So in a lot of cases, you're either hiring a property manager or a resident manager to kind of take care of the buildings, the snow removal, cutting of the grass, cleaning of the common areas, you know, maybe addressing any tenant issues or at least bringing them to your attention. Maybe some cases, collection of rent or whatever the case may be. So you're hiring these people to take care of that business on your behalf. And to be honest, by doing this and working in a multifamily setting and hiring management, it actually is going to make you a better investor. I'm a big believer that, you know, if you really want to scale your business, you need to make sure you're bringing the right people, the right team in place to help facilitate a lot of this stuff. So, you know, the reality is, if you really want to scale it, you're going to have to bring on a property manager, especially when you're dealing with multifamily properties. If you're looking at buying 2 or 3 buildings, you can imagine how much work that's going to be if you're trying to self-manage this. But the best part about multifamily is because of the cash flow that is available in that type of segment, it can offset very easily a lot of that expense for a property manager versus kind of more of a single family property where there may be some limitation to that. Now, the other advantage when it comes to the management side, because you're dealing with multiple units in one building, management fees can be a little bit more reasonable. I shouldn't say 12 is not reasonable. It is very reasonable because they do a lot of work. But in the property management on a multifamily side, you can see rates between 4 to 6%. They do vary from property managers. So just understand that's kind of what you're tending to see. So there are pros and cons to both. When you're doing more of a property management in a multifamily, more often than not, you probably want to bring in a property manager or resident manager to help take care of some of those things. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to move on to kind of the buyers and the sellers of this world, right? And this is a big difference. In single family, there's actually a lot more property selection than compared to multifamily. There's more choices, more opportunities. You will see tons of deals out there. You'll see, and the best part about it is in a lot of cases, you'll be dealing with a lot of unsophisticated buyers and sellers out there because they maybe have purchased their first home. This may be their second home. They've never done this before. But for yourself, you've been trained or you've got some knowledge and you have a lot of experience. And now you can be the more sophisticated buyer or seller in this particular market. So again, huge advantages to this in single family because there's so many more opportunities to be looking at, okay? So with that being said, there's a big advantage is the ability to sell to a much wider audience as well. So you can also, when you're selling the property, if there's some issue or concern that you need to sell it, it's going to be much easier to flip it off because you could sell it to an investor or a home buyer or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, individuals that are wanting to buy. So you can flip a property 30, 60 days. It's very common to kind of have those properties turn over a lot easier than something that you would see in more of a multifamily setting. So inventory is usually limited for multifamily, which in turn is harder to find those kind of plum opportunities. You're not going to have that kind of inventory that you would normally have in single family. So that's a relatively big con that you're going to be facing in multifamily, okay? But the real key is patience. And that's a hard one for us investors because we want to start buying, we want to get out there, and I get that. But patience is really the key to the investment segment, is you just really need to be really, really patient, okay? So you're dealing, the other part to this is with buyers and sellers, you're not like single family where you're dealing with unsophisticated investors. In multifamily, you are dealing with sophisticated investors, which means you actually do need to know what you're doing. And my opinion is you should be much more sophisticated than them. Because if you're treating this property, this multifamily deal, like you are a single family property, I'm very, very concerned for you. So take the time to learn and get familiarized with this. But again, you are dealing with much more sophisticated investor when you're dealing with the multifamily world. Not always, but in a lot of cases, the answer is yes, okay? Now, the other problem that you tend to find with multifamily is there's not as many buyers willing to play in this investment as well, or investment segment as well. So understand, if there are reasons for you to wanting to sell the property for whatever particular reason, you got to understand you've got a smaller pool of individuals that you're going to be attracting to, and the closing timeline is also going to be longer. So remember we talked about closing roughly 30 days with the single family. Again, it's not uncommon, 3 months, 5 months, if not longer. It does take longer. So to try to flip these types of market segment properties becomes a little bit more of a challenge. So just understand, okay? So the biggest obstacle when it comes to multifamily is finding the right deal, being very, very patient, and kind of waiting for it, okay? The best part about single family is there's deals everywhere to be had. And that's one of the huge advantages. And I know I'm talking in general terms right now in many different markets. I don't know, raise your hand if anybody's having challenges finding any really good deals, because I'm hearing that all over the place. It's much more challenging. It is very aggressive. People are buying like crazy, selling like crazy, and it's really hard. Multiple offers, it's nuts out there. So just understand, in the multifamily world, there is a lot of, there's not as many deals that are out there. So you just got to be patient, really, really, really patient. So as we're kind of starting to wrap things up and kind of to conclude a little bit, let's kind of look a little bit at the pros and cons for both, okay? So with that being said, single family pros and cons, obviously less expensive to get started, easier to sell and buy, larger pool of buyers and sellers, lower tenant turnover, lower tenant turnover, easier for financing for sure, lower acquisition costs. And again, we didn't talk into too much detail, but there's so many different strategies in regards to single family, like BRRRR and fix and flip and additional suites. And there's lots of different things that you can actually pursue and do. The problem, some of the cons, it's not as much cash flow. Vacancies can be very costly. If you're vacant for 1 month or 2 months, you literally lose all that income. And unfortunately, a lot of that expense may be coming out of your pocket. So just understand that. Scaling can definitely be more of a challenge, especially with debt service ratios and limitations from that perspective. So just be aware of that. That can be a little bit of a challenge. And then in addition, with the single family side, management fees can be a little bit more aggressive as well, okay? Now, when you get into kind of the multifamily side, definitely in the pros, scale faster, economies of scale, with property management fees. Again, you're dealing with, from a maintenance perspective, not too extensive in regards to, you're dealing with one boiler, one hot water tank, you're dealing with things that are one specific unit in the building. So you get that economy of scale to make it more appealing and reducing some of those expenses. Easier to sell and buy. And I referenced lower tenant turnover here. And the answer is yes and no. I actually think it's a little bit higher. I don't know why I've referenced as lower tenant turnover in this, but it is probably a little bit higher turnover than you would see in the single family for sure. The one thing I do like about multifamily, and I didn't touch on it too much, is recession proof. And so when I talk about multifamily, they are the lowest common denominator. So when times of turbulence actually happen in an economy and people are looking to reduce their expenses, living expenses was one of the first things that they tend to look at. So that person or that family that's moving in, that's moved into a 3-bedroom townhouse or is renting a 3-bedroom townhouse, they may downsize to a 2-bedroom. But again, it's the lowest common denominator from that perspective. So in times of recession, really multifamily is a great segment to be in. And I've ridden a couple of recessions in Alberta, and trust me, they've been really, really great during those particular times. Multiple income streams, again, we talked about not just the rent, we talked about laundry income, storage, and vending, and multiple ways of kind of generating multiple income streams. Huge advantage when you kind of go into the multifamily side. But this is the biggest one, is really that whole forced depreciation that I talked to as well earlier. Great way to generate profitability, increasing the appreciation, because you're not so dependent on what the market's actually doing. There's lots of ways to do it, but the key is make sure that you are buying right. Can't enforce that one enough, okay? So underline that, you gotta buy right, okay? So even though I said lower tenant turnover, it is higher vacancies for sure, more maintenance that can be involved. Again, multiple units in the building in itself. With that being said, there could be more fridges and more stoves that are going out, or there are more tenants all in one confined space. So you tend to kind of deal with some of those things. The biggest challenge, it is definitely, without a doubt, is the financing aspect. It is a huge pain in the butt. So just be aware of it. And it's just about being patient and just kind of following the steps. Now, for those that are interested in multifamily, just understand it's going to take longer. There's not as much inventory that's out there like we would see in single family. There's not as many buyers, not as many sellers, and it can take longer to sell when you're looking at a challenging time or you need to get rid of it for whatever reason. So just understand that there's lots of pros and cons kind of from both segments for sure. Okay. So let me ask you guys all the question. You guys have listened to this all. Which in your mind is better? I'm interested. So tell me, which one do you guys think is better now that you've kind of listened to this whole presentation? You've listened to me to kind of ramble on and talk a little bit about this. So what's in your mind is a better property? Is it multifamily or is it single family? Share it in the comments. Okay. But for a lot of you guys, as you can probably tell, there are definitely pros and cons to both. Okay. And it goes right back to the very beginning of the presentation. Okay. Because there really, truly isn't one right answer. And it really goes back to, what are your investment goals? What are some of those objectives that you're focusing on? You know, if you've got limited equity or capital to work with, maybe it is better utilized to kind of rinse and repeat that whole process to do burst strategies or fix and flips. If you're looking at from a cash flow perspective, maybe it is multifamily that's a little bit better for you. So it's trying to understand what are those goals and objectives to begin with. That's the first step. Secondly is understanding the limitation. What are those limitations for yourself in regards, do I have enough capital? Is my debt service going to be impacted, and all of that? So highlighting some of those things. You know, if you're looking at multifamily, do you have the means for a down payment, those closing costs? Do you have that? Even more importantly, do you have the knowledge for the multifamily side? So make sure that you take the time to understand it. They are very different. And I hope I kind of opened your eyes a little bit to that. So if there are some of those limitations, understand that, have clarity to that. And it's not for you to just stop and do nothing. Maybe the step is, I just need to take that first step. And maybe because I can't do multifamily right now, that's okay. Start off with single family and start to grow from there. For a lot of us, that's how we all started. We all began that way. I did as well. To be honest, with my opinion, what I like is actually both strategies. And that may be kind of shocking. I love multifamily, but don't get me wrong. I have my eye open for single family as well, because I want to look at both strategies, because what it does gives me much more opportunity to choose from. But the key aspect is know both. You need to learn both so you understand how they each work very separately. But by understanding both, it gives you so much more opportunity to choose from, much more places to park your money and much more places to invest in, okay? So again, understand your investment objectives, understanding your goals, and making sure that you have that type of clarity for yourself before you're making the right decision, okay? So with that, I'm gonna kind of conclude this session tonight. Thank you guys all for all your participation. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Give me a thumbs up if we're good, you enjoyed this, because like I said, I hopefully you guys really liked it. In addition to that, I've also had some interesting requests lately because of some of the graduates, and I see some of the graduates from my class here joining me today, so thank you for that. For those that are interested in Elevate Masterclass, I've had people asking if I am planning on doing another information session. So I am going to be doing an information session again on Saturday, and it's actually going to be April the 3rd at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So these are the 3 courses that we're running. We've only got a few segments left when it comes to residential real estate investing, but all 3 programs: residential real estate investing fundamentals, raising capital through joint venture partnerships, and then multifamily investing. So if you guys just want to learn more about this, join me. I'm going to be posting this again tomorrow. You guys are first to hear this as well. Come and join me if you guys want to learn a little bit more. And if you want to partake, again, we'll be opening up that registration we've only got a couple spots left. I don't have very much left, but people have been asking. So I'm just going to do one more session just before I wrap it up because we're getting started in the next few weeks. So with that being said, folks, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me again tonight. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. And I guess stay tuned, as we'll be having another presentation next week, and I'll surprise you with that in the next coming days. So with that being said, have a wonderful evening. Thanks for joining me, and we will talk to you guys all soon. Bye now.